The latest tech.
I'm Alexa. I can answer your questions.
Interviews.
And we are evolving, and we are seeing an amazing opportunity that is happening.
Accessibility.
Accessibility is one of our core values. It's even a part of our mission statement.
This is DoubleTap TV.
Welcome to another edition of DoubleTap TV. Thank you guys so much for being along with us each and every single week. An exciting episode lined up for you. Apple recently held one of their fall events, unveiling a couple new iPhones, a new iPad, and we're going to talk all about it this week. But before we do, I want you guys to get involved. If you're not already involved, we want to hear from you. Our email address is feedback@AMI.CA. Of course, on Twitter, it is @DoubleTapCanada. And don't forget that hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap. It helps us find all those questions from you. I am Mark AFLALO with Stephen Scott alongside for the ride each and every single week. We're so happy to be here, Stephen, every week. And this week is, I guess one of those tips of the iceberg for us, because we really are Apple fans when it comes to the phones and the iPads and everything at the end of the day. So when we see new iPhones, after everybody else has released new devices, we get excited. And I could tell by the look on your face that you are so excited this week.
Yes, you're right, Mark. I'm always excited when it comes to new phones, right? I mean, why wouldn't you be excited by new smartphones? And of course, with this new lineup, we're seeing some really exciting new devices coming along. Exciting from one particular perspective, if I'm honest, and I think that is the camera. I think we have to be realistic here. The technology we're talking about hasn't moved on massively. This is very much evolution, not revolution. And I feel we're saying that more and more as these Apple events come along.
You know, when it comes to the phones, we also have new software. iOS 15 has finally been released. We're not going to spend too much time on iOS 15 this week because we want to dedicate an episode to that operating system and really walk you through the accessibility features. I forgot to mention off the top that we're going to be joined this week by a friend of the show, James Rath, known as the Blind Filmmaker. He's going to be joining us later on in the show to talk about the iPhone 13 from his perspective because, as you said, Stephen, one of the biggest changes across the board, especially for this iPhone 13 lineup and the Pro lineup in particular, is that camera system. And really, I guess, the question I get most often, which is probably the same question you get, which is, should I be upgrading myself to this phone? What is the answer you give people when they say, should I upgrade to the iPhone 13?
It is a question I get asked a lot. I get asked it usually from the point of view of accessibility. Let me try and give you an overall answer first. I think that the truth be told, this is not the year to upgrade if you've got the iPhone 12 or you've got the iPhone 12 Pro at the moment. If you've got those devices, you probably don't have a need for a 13 or a 13 Pro. If you're coming to this from an iPhone SE or you're coming to it from an iPhone 7 or an iPhone 8, even perhaps an iPhone 11, this might be a worthwhile upgrade. But it's difficult, right? Because the main change does seem to be that camera. That would certainly even apply to the older devices as well. And when I say older, we're only talking a couple of years. They're still going to get their updates. You talked about iOS 15. Those devices are still getting that way back to the iPhone 6S, I think it is. Even the original iPhone SE gets iOS 15. So, if you've got an older phone, you're still going to get the benefits that everyone else gets in terms of software. And, hopefully you'll still get a reasonable amount of decent battery life and performance out of those devices as well. But the challenge is, what's the benefit in upgrading? Look, this year, I have to be honest, unless you're into the camera, there isn't a huge reason to make that upgrade, especially if you're on the 12 range at the moment. If you're on previous generations, it's the camera you're upgrading for. The performance is good, don't get me wrong, but it is just as good on my iPhone 7 that I still have. And iOS 15 still performs really well, even on the original SE. So camera is the main reason why you would want the upgrade. And I would say that across the board, and I would especially say that to blind and partially sighted people.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. But my opinion kind of really depends on the person who's asking me, saying, what phone are they using now? If they're using an iPhone 12 now, it's kind of a natural saying, don't bother spending the money. Don't waste your money on this. It's just not worth doing that. However, there are people who don't necessarily upgrade every cycle. And to those people, I definitely say, if you haven't upgraded in a couple of years, this is definitely a worthwhile upgrade. That being said, the next year model of iPhone, so the iPhone 14, whatever it may be called, is set to be a dramatically different phone. We're expecting to see a whole hardware change across the board, and the form factor is going to be different. So maybe holding out just one more year may get you ahead of that pack if you actually want to wait for that. But of course, it really is up to the decision of many people and how they use that device themselves. But Stephen, We also want to mention the iPad Mini 6, because this device, which I'm holding in my hand right now, is definitely one of my takeaways and one of my favorite announcements from this year's event. And we've got the new iPhones right here sitting on my desk, and I know you've got some over there that we're going to go hands-on and talk all about the design, bring James Rath on and get his opinion after we take a quick break. Are you good to go?
I am. I can't wait to talk about the iPad Mini. It was the star of the show.
Definitely the star of the show, and we will come back with the iPad Mini and, of course, James Rath after we take a quick break here on Double Tap TV. Stick around.
For more great Double Tap TV content, visit AMI.CA/DoubleTap. This is Double Tap TV.
We are back on Double Tap TV. Mark AFLALO with Stephen Scott by my side. Thank you guys for being along for the ride. I'll remind you how to get in touch with us after, because I mention it so often, and I know you guys want us to dive in to these brand new products. Stephen, where do you want to start this week? Because I've got in front of me, if I change my angle over here, you can see the boxes, and I'll unveil. I've got the iPhone Mini right here, which is not even set up, as you can tell, because I have to return this to Apple one of these days. And I've got myself the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Let's start with the Pro Max, because it's, you know, obviously what I've been using on a daily basis. But we'll start with the design of this. Number one, the first thing you'll notice form factor wise compared to the iPhone 12 is that you've got that beautiful shiny, I think it's stainless steel on the outer rim of this device, of course broken up with the antenna lines. You've got that sleep wake button on the right side of the device, and of course on the left side you've got the volume rocker up and down, plus that vibration on or off button, which is great. Now, on the back of this device, it's a glass back, and what you'll notice on the Pro versions is that it's a matte glass back. Matte glass back. I can say it.
Not easy for you to say.
No, not at all. But the camera system, number one, it's a little bit larger than the previous generation because it's got a larger sensor on board and larger lenses, and that's a glossy, shiny kind of finish on the camera system. Other than that, design-wise on this device, you've got the lightning cable connector on the bottom there. And what they've done is actually repositioned the earpiece. So when you're holding this up to your head like this on your right, when you're holding it up to your head, the earpiece is actually higher on the phone. It's actually in the actual bezel itself. So the only thing in that notch are the camera system for the front-facing camera and the LiDAR sensor and everything else that might come on board, those proximity sensors. Same exact thing on the iPhone Mini. If I bring this one into frame here, you could see that the iPhone Mini, obviously a heck of a lot smaller than the iPhone Pro Max when they're sitting side by side. A beautiful display, not the 120 hertz display that I forgot to mention about on the Pro Max, which you notice right away when you're scrolling up and down, but it's still got a beautiful display. It's still got a higher notch on there on board on the Mini as well. But the difference on the Mini is that the outer rim of this device is actually a matte finish, and I've got that midnight color here, so it's a matte black on the outside. But that means that the back of the device, and this is the same for the 13, it's a shiny glossy back, so you're going to get your fingerprints all over this device, whereas the camera system, and on this camera system only 2 cameras, again a little bit bigger, but that has that matte finish. So they do that contrast to really differentiate the phones. So it is kind of staying up to par with the previous generation model. Which phones do you have in front of you?
Well, you know what? This time round, I kind of surprised myself. I thought I would be sitting here with an iPhone 13 Pro, or maybe even a 13 Mini, because I was kind of toying between whether I liked the Mini or the regular size. And if you're going to get the regular size, you're going to buy the Pro, right? But I didn't. I ended up buying what I've got in my hand here, which is the regular iPhone 13. So nothing particularly amazing going on here. I didn't feel the need to have the better camera that was inside the Pro. The camera inside this device is so good anyway. What on earth do I need anything else for? So no, I decided to go for the lovely iPhone 13. I think I got this in the midnight as well. I'm honestly terrible with colours and I don't really care too much. But yeah, it was a dark colour, which is kind of strange because actually, truth be told, with the little vision I do have, it would be better if I had a really bright MagSafe case on the back of this device, because then I could at least see the phone when it's sitting down, you know, lying down on the desk or whatever. That's often a big challenge for me. But it is, you know, when you're coming to buy a new phone, you're often thinking about what you're going to be using it for. You're thinking about storage as well, right? So how much storage do I need? How much is in the cloud versus how much I'll need on the device? If you're taking lots of photos, if you're going to use lots of videos, you're going to need onboard storage. So I chose the 256 gig version, which I think is more than enough for what I need. And it's a really lovely phone. I mean, it's exactly the same as the previous year model. If you have had your hands on an iPhone 12, This is no different. This phone is exactly the same. The power button's the same place. You've still got the volume buttons on the right and the left-hand side, the power button on the right. You still have your lightning port connector at the bottom. No USB-C as yet, as we thought that might happen. But you know what? It's still a great phone, still a great device, and you know, the upgrades are small. I chose this because I'm a geek and I love to have the latest. Would I need to buy this new phone? Probably not. Mark, I love that iPhone, but can we please talk about this, the brand new iPad mini?
We'll get to the iPad mini, I promise. And we did promise that James Rath is going to make an appearance. James Rath is the blind videographer. What does he call himself?
The blind filmmaker.
The blind filmmaker. So you had a chance to catch up with James right after the Apple event, and we talked about obviously a lot of things, including the iPad and his experience with Apple. And we're going to be talking to James over the next couple episodes. But you asked James, you said, what is the best iPhone in his view? So that comes from, you know, his point of view, from a filmmaker point of view. And this was his response.
So in my opinion, it's going to vary. It's nice that options are available. For me, something I personally wanted to try to take on is, well, would a mini basically stop me from using my phone as much? And, you know, it's like, I feel like we're so connected these days, like a little too connected, where it's like the mindless scrolling and refreshing the feeds. And I wanted to sort of have a reason to kind of step back from that. So I'm like, well, if I have the mini, I still have my Zoom, voiceover, text-to-speech. I can do that, but it might encourage me to like step away from this device a bit more, you know, if it's not in a way like making it just slightly more inaccessible for someone with like less than 10% of sight like myself. Now I've come to find that I like the Pro. I like the regular Pro. I tried the Pro Max for a bit. It's just a little too big. I would prefer, I think the applications I would want to use a Pro Max for, I'd rather just have an iPad mini. The camera on the Pro Max this year is no different from what's on the Pro. Now, last year, the 12 Pro Max had a slightly better stabilization than the regular 12 Pro. So as a videographer, as someone who's making films and sometimes pulling out an iPhone and, hey, I have options to pick which one of these is going to have the best camera or look.
Really interesting to hear James talk about the phones and those, you know, benefits of the camera being as accessible as it is. So good to hear James Rath talk about that. But look, Mark, I've waited so long. When are we going to talk about the iPad mini? I've got it in my hand here. Come on. When are we talking about this great device?
Okay, fine. We'll talk. Look what I have in my hands. I've got an iPad mini in my hand with a beautiful orange cover. We're going to talk about this in a couple seconds. It is Double Tap TV. Stephen Scott and Mark AFLALO with you each and every single week. If you want to get in touch, feedback at AMI.CA, our email address on Twitter. We are at Double Tap Canada. Don't forget the hashtag AskDoubleTap. And of course, we're on all of the social media. Just look for doubletap.online. We'll be back in a second with that iPad conversation. Stick around.
For more great Double Tap TV content, visit AMI.CA/DoubleTap. This is Double Tap TV.
We are back on Double Tap TV. Thank you guys so much for being here. I know I said it right before the break, but I will say it again. Feedback at AMI.CA is the email address for you guys to get in touch with us with any kind of feedback. Do you like what we're talking about? Do you dislike what we're talking about? Do you've got a suggestion? No problem. It is feedback at AMI.CA. And of course, reach out on Twitter. It is at Double Tap Canada with the hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap. Mark AFLALO and Stephen Scott with you. James Rath here in spirit. You had a chance to catch up with him a couple of weeks ago when Apple unveiled this event. And we're going to be talking more to James next week, Stephen, because next week we're going to be talking all about Apple 10 years after the passing of Steve Jobs. Talk about the company, talk about his point of view as a filmmaker and using Apple devices. And he's going to tell us how Apple saved his life, which is a pretty cool story. But before we get into that, and I will tease it a bit more, iPad mini.
Yes. Here it is, the iPad mini. I'll tap the screen with my finger as it taps to wake so that you can see the wonderful screen on it. And you know what? This is a great device. This is such a cool device. This was the star of that Apple event. And do you know what? I was not in the market for an iPad at all, especially not an iPad mini. But I think because I wasn't as excited about the iPhones this time round, I thought, I'm going to get myself one of these. I mean, at least that's the excuse that I'm using, and hopefully my wife will understand. But, you know, I love these devices, and I'll tell you why I love this particular one. At the size, you know, what they've redesigned the iPad mini. It now has what I would say are much more sharpened edges, not that kind of rounded back design that it used to have. So it's much more squared off, even though it does have those little corners, those rounded corners on it. You know, one massive change here, and that is that the power button, which is much bigger now, is at the top right. As you hold the device in your hand in portrait mode, from the top right, you've got this power button that sits there, and that has Touch ID in it. And that is really the selling point for me. I love Touch ID. I always have. And I kind of wish they would do this on the phones as well, even as an alternative to Face ID. So you've got options. Face ID doesn't always work for me. So, you know, a lot of people love Face ID. They always go, oh, how great Face ID is. I'm not as big a fan. I like having options. Now, this doesn't have Face ID, interestingly. You are not getting the option on these devices. They are telling you it's either Touch ID or Face ID, and I kind of hope one day they'll merge the two. But yeah, pretty cool. You've got the Touch ID in there, and then on the left-hand side, you've got the left and right volume buttons as well, little volume rockers, which is really cool. And that's it. In terms of buttons, that is it. The one other difference here is on the bottom of the device, you've got a USB-C connector. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means you can plug in a whole wide range of different peripherals now, and you get more access to the system. Whereas with a Lightning port, you could do some things. You could maybe connect to HDMI. You could maybe get a headphone jack back with an adapter plugged in, another dongle. But this time around, you can now plug in a dock, for example. You could have a keyboard on there. You could have a monitor on there. You could have a hard drive connected, so you can transfer all your pictures across from your camera, for example, through an SD card. Lots of different ways now to connect to this device. It's small, it's portable, it's light. I love the size, and you know, good camera in it as well. I mean, you know, we keep going on about the cameras in these devices. That's what Apple love to talk about. The camera inside this is very good as well. So, you know, really handy. If you are someone who's low vision, who, you know, can maybe get by with VoiceOver and uses VoiceOver every day on their phone, maybe you'll have an iPhone 13 mini as your main phone. But sometimes, like me, when you're on a store like Amazon, you want to look at the pictures. It doesn't have to be Amazon, any store, right? But, you know, when you're on a store, you're looking at the images, you want to get in close and have a look. That's where something like this can come in. It's also a great leisure device. You've got the stereo speakers now in this device, which means when you're holding it up in landscape mode and you're watching your favourite Netflix show at night, you're getting great sound as well. And you'll get, of course, great audio when you're hooked up with your, you know, AirPods Max or AirPods Pro or whatever it might be you've got connected on there. It's a really great device, and I think these are going to fly off the shelves.
No, it's definitely solid. It feels solid in the hands too, and I'm showing it on screen right now from that front point of view. You can see it really is a tiny device. When you're holding it next to the iPhone Pro Max, it's about the same height of the Max when you're holding it in landscape mode, but it's got a wider footprint. So you've got stereo speakers on either side, perfectly placed. They actually placed the volume rocker, as you said, on the top now, because the actual board itself, the motherboard, when you're looking at this device from the top, is on the top strip of the device over here. So everything is there. The camera system is there. The volume rockers are there, which is pretty cool. But it is really quite the nice device.
I want to ask you though, because I didn't go for a brightly coloured case, and I kind of wish I had, like I was saying about the iPhone. You got the orange you mentioned? That sounds pretty delicious.
It is a delicious case. The cool thing is, like all the other iPads, when you take a look over here, it's got that fully magnetic back. So it sticks on quite nicely. You get that nice little sound when it clips over, and it just folds over over the top, and it maintains the nice thin form factor. So you can flip it and get this kind of A-frame look, so you can actually hold your device up, so when you're watching stuff, you can actually consume it like that. But it's a really nice form factor. It's not like the Type Touch case that they used to have, where it was really heavy and added a lot of weight to it. This one just snaps on and protects it. So that is the iPad Mini 6. Of course, I'm curious to know what you guys think. Let us know. It is feedback at AMI.CA, and of course on Twitter we are at DoubleTap Canada with that hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap. As we said earlier on the show, I want to thank James Rath for being here in spirit. You had a chance to catch up with him a couple of weeks ago, right after that first Apple event, and you had a great conversation with him, which we're going to be talking more about next week, which is how has Apple evolved in the 10 years after the passing of Steve Jobs? And one question that you asked James, which we're going to bring in way more detail next week, was how has Apple and Steve Jobs in particular impacted his life? Here's a clip.
I've definitely seen quite a bit of documentaries, come across articles. I know he had a flawed character, but I admire that he had a vision, and he sought it out, and he surrounded himself with brilliant people who could help. Like, he was a true, I think he was a brilliant creative leader, but also not perfect for sure. And I think there's times too in his life where he acknowledged shortcomings or faults in his philosophy or thinking. And especially there's been a lot of accounts, towards the end of his time here on Earth, where he shared a bit more personally about things. If he had more time, things he'd address or tackle. But that's all like in his book or interviews that you can always follow up on. But I think just overall, he may have not have been like valuing accessibility his whole life, but he surrounded himself around people who made him look at it closer and really helped spearhead a team at Apple to take on accessibility and to make sure that they're baking it into their products at no additional cost, which was significant for me in the time that I was growing up. And I'm glad that change happened when it did, because what that's created, I think, especially in the smartphone era that we're in, well, now you have all this accessibility competition, and that's great. Like, that's healthy.
That is James Raft, a blind filmmaker. He'll be on with us next week. Thank you guys for being here on this week's edition of Double Tap TV. We'll catch you again next week.
Hosted by Mark Aflalo and Stephen Scott. Editing Jordan Steves and Mark Aflalo. Voiceover Anna Vocino. Integrated Described Video Specialist Ron Rickford. Coordinating Producer Jennifer Johnson. Director Production Kara Nye. Director Programming Brian Perdue. VP Content Development and Programming John Melville. President and CEO David Errington. Copyright 2021 Accessible Media Inc.